We're going live now. Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm not sure if they can see me yet, but I think they can. Yes, they can. Hi, everyone. My name is Flora. I'm also
Perfect. Hello, everyone.
feedback here. I'm also a co-founder of WeTech.
Yes, login.
And I'm super excited for this one because I'm also a bootcamp grad, and I feel like we have something in common. I am Wura. Yes. And I'm sure some of you guys here in the chats here today are also bootcamp grads. So I'm super excited to, hear from Wura and, hear her feedback and her journey so far. So everybody, please welcome Wura. Wura, we're glad to have you on here today. How are you feeling? How is Nigeria? Where are you tuning in from today?
I'm feeling great, thank you. I'm based in Lagos, so definitely currently tuning in from my house. Been indoors, Corona since like March.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking it's raining, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And again, I'm excited for this one because we both come from non-traditional, computer science backgrounds. And for me, it's just like I see you studied economics, right? And then you sort of like went into products, US design, and then you went to the boot camp, and then now you're working for Microsoft, which is great. You're repping us boot camp grads, would you mind sharing your story, your journey? Why did you transition over from economics to like tech? What led you or influenced you throughout that journey?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to everyone for tuning in to come hear me share my story. And I'm also really grateful for this platform, and thanks to the organizers, because I think it's super important that I tell my story. And I'm talking about why I think it's important at the very end.
Yeah.
But then I would like to start off by, first of all, just giving like a brief summary of like how I got here. So 2010 to 2014, while I was in uni, I studied economics, as she said. And then for the most part, I think at that point in time, even up until now, like the one thing that I was insanely obsessed with was just like anything tech related. So I would always like do research on like the Internet of Things. I was always on Kickstarter. I was just always hyped about like downloading like mobile apps, checking out web apps. And I mean, for me, it wasn't like about like having like an active presence on these apps. I was more excited about like the ideas and then just the look and feel. It was just the thing that made me happy, which was weird because it was just me and my gadget at that point in time. But yeah, so that's where it all really started. And even during that time, I it was just an obsession. It was a dream of mine to be like a software developer. But at that point in time, I never imagined myself being a software developer. I think it's because of, I think just the mindset that I had and then just the information that I had seen out there at that point in time, people around me made it seem like it was near impossible for you to switch from like a non-science background to like a programming background. And I didn't even like I went to art class. So like I just always thought it's probably not going to be possible. And I used to tell myself and a few of my close friends that if I ever come to this planet again, like I'm not even going to blink twice. I'm definitely going to study software engineering or computer science. So yeah, like it was just something that I loved like researching on. And since I couldn't like work as a software developer, I just told myself that, you know what, I would probably do something like in that industry, but with the skills that I have. And then after I finished studying economics, I started to work in marketing because I also really love marketing. And then I just really hope that I probably would get a job like in marketing, branding role with a tech firm, and I'll be good. But I mean, that wasn't clearly okay for me. And between 2015 and 2016, so I had this like insane like app idea like that I was like insanely obsessed with. And I was obsessed with this app idea because I believed at that point in time that there was a problem that had to be solved, that hadn't been solved by anyone. I still think it hasn't been solved today, by the way. But then at that point in time, like I I was hell bent on like seeing this app come to life. And 2016, mostly 2016, I had gone through different series of developers. And like at the end of 2016, I still had nothing to show. Like it was just one setback after the other with trying to like build these apps with these developers. And it was so frustrating because like this is something that I really love and I just want to see like the result of what I love like come to life. But then these developers kept on like at some point I even started the process with one of them, but then had to pull out for some reason. And ending of 2016, oh, and by the way, you mentioned UI UX design. So in 2016, right, the reason I actually went into UI UX design was because with one of the developers, one of the developer companies that I approached, we started the process. And at some point, I only gave them wireframes. I mean, because everything was crude back then. And at some point, they were like, oh, do you know what? I think it's better if we have like prototypes of what you want. Because when they would show me the results, I'll be like, no, this doesn't look anything like what I envisioned. Then we now agree that, okay, I will find like a UI UX designer to design exactly what I want. And then they'll build it to specification. And you will not believe that, like, trying to find a designer in 2016, I'm not kidding you. I don't know if I did search or, but I searched everywhere. Like trying to find gold. I mean, here in Nigeria. And I mean, I had like a small budget. So I was trying to find a designer within my budget. And crazy. Sorry?
I was just saying, it is hard. It is hard.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then after I was searching for like weeks, I just thought to myself one day, you know what? I'm going to learn this thing and do it. It was so crazy. That was the beginning of my journey. Like that was the moment when I realized, like, oh my gosh, like they lied to me. This thing is not rocket science. Like, even if I'm coming from a non-science background, because you won't believe that, like, I remember that weekend, I probably watched like a 2 minute video on how to like design a getting started mobile app screen with Adobe. And in that weekend, like it was like a high for me because like I designed like over 100 screens. I'm not kidding you. I'm like a huge nerd, but then not necessarily. But at that point in time, like there was nothing I cared more about than to see that come to life. So like when I saw that I could actually like use the tool, and it just, I wouldn't say it didn't just come easily. I think it's because, you know, as I explained in uni, I was just always checking out apps for the look and feel. So you can imagine when I started designing that kind of transition, and I could like mentally picture like what I wanted and the things where I wanted things to go. So it was just amazing. So that's why I actually started UI UX design. And I mean, thankfully, I got some gigs to design for some other companies. But after some time, ending of 2016, after I faced all these setbacks, I realized like I don't love UI UX design. I mean, it's really nice, but it's not something that I love because I don't think I am so creative. So I just didn't want to focus on that full time. And then also January 2017, I decided to like pause on like trying to pursue this app idea and then just reflect on every single thing that had happened because I'd given almost 2 years of my life into this thing. And then after reflecting, I decided that I was going to drop every single thing and go learn to code and change my role to a software development role. And it was crazy because, as I told you, like I had people tell me like, "Oh, this is near impossible," and even mostly for girls. And I mean, I'm not one to believe these things, but in 2017, I guess my so much frustration, and then I got into this boot camp called Coding Dojo in America. It was a 4 months program, and I did 3 different stacks: Java, JavaScript, and Python. And we did the 3 different stacks. Like throughout the 4 months period. And I remember like when I first got there, the very first thing that they told us was, okay, so this isn't like a regular school, right? They were like, yes, you have an instructor in your class, but the instructor isn't going to be like necessarily teaching you like how to code. And they said instead we have tutorials that we put together for you, so you have to go through these tutorials yourself But then if you get stuck, your instructor can help you out. And you're like, but when you get stuck, the very first thing that you should do is that you should try and figure out the problem on your own. And then if you try and after some time you can't, then you should ask a classmate of yours. And then if your classmate can't, then you can ask your instructor. And I remember when I first heard this, I was like, this is crazy. I paid so much money to be here. Like, I thought you were going to teach me. Like, why are you telling me that I have to learn on my own? I would have stayed back in Nigeria. That was like my first thought. But I will tell you for a fact, that's the best advice I ever received at that bootcamp. And I am so grateful that I took it. And I'll explain why. Because when you're trying to figure out the problems on your own, the journey of getting to the solution is so valuable because you learn so much more than you bargained for. Exactly. You learn about things that you didn't even think existed. As if I had not seen my instructor like straight up, and then my instructor points me to the very end, I missed that journey. And I strongly believe that the goal of the bootcamp was to ensure that you come developer, not that you are heavily reliant on someone showing you how to do your work. And I was really grateful that I took that advice. And most of the time, I would try and figure out stuff on my own, and it was great. And then I finished from the bootcamp and came back to Nigeria. I got my first job at a company called WeTech. It was a full stack development role, purely JavaScript. Then after a couple of months, I got my second job at another company called Sankore. It was heavily Java, also web development, but then I did heavy Java server-side stuff. And then amazing experience there as well, made some amazing like relationships with people. And then after some time there, I got my current job at Microsoft as a software engineer. And now, so like that is like the journey of like what happened, like what inspired me, like what pushed me. And I'm so grateful for every single, and I wouldn't like do it again. I wouldn't do anything, sorry. I wouldn't do what I mean. And then I would like to share like, I think a few key things that I believe really helped me all throughout the journey from starting to learn to code up until now, even on my job. And the very first thing for me, I believe, is passion. And I know people always say like passion can be over exaggerated, blah, blah, blah. But then I believe like because of the passion that I had for years, it keeps me going when things don't make sense. And when I was learning, things did not make sense over 80% of the time, even more. So like, I didn't care. Like, I didn't care if I thought something was going to take, if they said, oh, this would take 1 hour, and then I spent the whole day, I didn't care. The passion kept me going because I wasn't really focused on just the struggles. And it seemed really hard, but it was so beautiful. And the passion made it beautiful. That's why I think passion is so important. It's like anyone that has the passion can go into this. Like that's all you need.
That's true.
So like, I'll give an example. When I first started, like before I went to my bootcamp, I did like an introduction course. Right. One of the very first things I had to do was to like set up my terminal. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. One of the very first things I had to do was to set up my terminal. And I just had to run a couple of commands, but I had no clue what terminal meant. Like that, I have done zero anything when it comes to coding. And I remember that day, something that I thought was going to take like a couple of minutes ended up taking almost the whole day. And I was like, at first I was so frustrated, like, is this going to be my life? Like, what the hell? But I was calm. And because of the passion, I just kept moving. Like, for that. So another thing that I think has helped me come so far, which I think is super important, is positive affirmations on things that you are trying to work towards. And I know it sounds cliche, like positive affirmations, like just speaking out loud that you want something. But I can assure you, like it's not a technical thing, but it's something that I think has helped me so much. Like because it keeps you focused on the goal and it just blocks out the noise. And I'll give an example. So when we first joined, one of the other things that they said to us on the very first day of the bootcamp was, so you guys, they told us we're going to be taking an exam after every single stack that we learned. And the exam was basically building like a full-blown web app. They gave us wireframes. They gave us exact specifications. You had to build it successfully to specifications with, of course, ensuring code quality, and then deploying it. And you have to do all of that in 4.5 hours. So if you could successfully meet the specifications, build the features, meet the wireframes, deploy successfully, and if your code was good, if you got above 95%, then that means that you successfully passed. And then they told us that since the inception of the bootcamp, which was 5 years before 2017, they were like only less than 5% had actually taken this exam on the very first sitting, like all 3 of them, and passed them successfully on the first sitting. They told us that not to discourage us. They told us if you don't pass it the first time, just take another question the next day, but just ensure you get to a point where you pass one. And when I heard that, immediately my goal was like in my head, like I'm like, okay, do you know what? Every day, every morning for 4 months, I kept on telling myself, congratulating myself for passing every single one of my stack exam in one sitting at the very first try and getting above 95%. And I said that every day to myself. And I strongly believe that me saying that really played a large role in me like doing very well at bootcamp. And thankfully, at the very end of the bootcamp, I was able to take all my 3 exams in one sitting on the very first try and come out with above 95%. So that was really pretty awesome. Yeah. Another example that I would give, like when it comes to positive affirmations, I remember when I was applying for my current job at Microsoft, and like once I got the very first email, I'm like, okay, there's no two way about it. Like there's no two way about it. and every day for weeks before my interview, every single day, I would congratulate myself for passing the interview for that specific role. I would congratulate myself for getting that job. Like I would say this is like one of the very first things I say to myself in the morning. As I'm driving past the office, my current office, I would actually see and then be like, oh, my new office building. And then I'll laugh with myself. I would actually say these things out loud. Yeah. And it seems crazy. I can tell you for a fact, the reason I do these things is because even when I was preparing for my Microsoft interview, like it didn't go like 100% well. But I didn't care because I was just reminded of my affirmations, and that just kept me going. I didn't focus on the negative side of things. Another thing again that I think key that has really helped me is just always being open to embrace challenges, even if it seems very scary at the beginning. And this always happens. And the reason is because it's an opportunity to learn. It's also an opportunity for growth because it could put you on the map to be considered for a new role or something. And I'll give a reference. Like, I don't know if you guys can remember in Spider-Man Far Away From Home when Fury came to meet Peter Parker where he was, and he was like, oh, there's this villain in Prague, and I need you to go and fight this villain. And then Peter Parker was like, I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like, I don't do international villains. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he was terrified. But at the end of the day, he ended up like going to fight, and then he saved the world. So that was awesome. So I always have that feeling when challenges are being thrown my way, like at work, while I was learning, when someone brings something that seems like, oh my gosh, like I have no clue what this is. I always initially feel like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But then I immediately, after that, and I remember like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to get excited and learn. And I'll give an example. So my very first job, it was, remember I said it was a pure JavaScript role. I was less than 3 months on this job. And can you imagine that, like, so they came one day and they were like, oh, so Wura, I know you've just been working like in JavaScript stuff, but there's and we told them that you are very good. We really sold you, and you're going to be working there part-time, like on contract, because they need a Java developer for web application development stuff. And I remember when I first heard it, I was like terrified, like, oh my gosh, this is my very first job, and I've only been doing JavaScript stuff for less than 3 months, and now you want me to go somewhere else to embarrass myself? Are you not kidding me? But then after like being terrified, I remember, okay, this could be an opportunity. So I took it, and the very first 4 days at this new place, it was so scary because like at some point it got so bad that they started doubting, like, is she actually a developer? Because I was wasting time to like set up like configuration. But weeks after, days after, and then weeks went by, it got really good. It got so good that this other company decided to make me an offer, and then they poached me from my former company.
Wow,
And then that's how I got my second job.
that's crazy.
So like, yeah, that's really crazy. I was so grateful that I took that opportunity, because imagine if I chickened out and I said, "Oh, you guys, I'm sorry, but I don't feel comfortable. Like, I haven't done anything Java related professionally." I wouldn't have gotten the second job that I had gotten, and I'm super grateful that I embraced that challenge. So I encourage people listening to be open to doing more of that.
And I, like, like the whole, I'm very, happy to see, have you on board here today because, again, most of, our audience today, I'm not sure if they're, boot camp grads, but I've spoken to some traditional computer science majors. And, the first thing they would tell me is like, I don't think I would ever survive in a boot camp. Boot camps are very, very, they're a stretch. They're very, it's one of the, for me, as a personal experience, it's been one of the most challenging but also invigorating experience I've ever, had to go through. One of my mentors told me, really at a boot camp, you learn how to learn. They teach you how to learn. Because even on the job as a developer, no one is holding your hands. If you don't know the answer to a question, the first thing you do is, go to Stack Overflow, do research on your own before you like, okay, you know what? Let me seek out a mentor. So it's a very like you learn so much. It's a very research-based career. You can virtually do anything with the skills that you have. And I think for me, that was one of the motivations that inspired me to, switching my career completely. Right. So I think, Wura, you gave so many great feedback, so many great answers. And I really love how, you've transitioned in your career and made that complete switch. It's not easy. And I want to congratulate you once again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to move over to the next question. Another important thing for as a bootcamp grad is making sure that you're confident, right? Making sure that you're confident even after the bootcamp, because bootcamps are like what, 12 weeks, 3 months, 4 months, or even less. One thing I faced was the imposter syndrome. I don't know if you faced it too, but once I graduated, applying for jobs, I was getting rejected. I wasn't sure if I actually had the skills to be a developer. Did you ever experience that? And how did you like land your first gig? How did you gain that confidence back?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think everyone, like, I mean, I would want to believe that everyone that like went through the process of a boot camp would definitely like feel like a fraud at some point in time, because it's crazy to think that you can learn so much in such little time and then actually get a job. So I think for me, I definitely was terrified. I was terrified, but then I was more happy than terrified. I was more excited, like, and ecstatic than scared. So that kept me going. But then regarding your question of how I got my first gig, so what I did was that I like to mention one thing though. For every single job that I have gotten, I think one thing that has really helped me is at my boot camp, every single day we learned algorithms like in the morning. And I think it's extremely important, like especially like for those coming from a non-traditional background. So it's extremely important to learn algorithms, like practice them inside your learning process, because it would really help. Like it really helped me during my technical interviews, and it really helps me to like understand more of what happens under the hood with programming. And then regarding like getting my first job, I think one thing I did was that I thought to myself, like, how can I stand out? Because I mean, I realized like, well, probably mostly going to be people with little or no experience applying for this job. So the very first thing I did was that I looked at the websites of like personal websites of like already established developers like in the industry that had jobs for years. And then I built my own website, and then I ensured that I built one that would kind of match the standard of already established developers' websites that I was seeing, because I wanted anyone that would look at my resume and then look at my personal website and then see my portfolio, not to think of me as someone that just finished from a boot camp. I wanted them to remember when this. So I think it's very important to always raise the bar, especially when you're coming with like little or no experience. And I mean, thankfully, like as a dev, like one thing that you can do is invest so much time in like building like a website that would blow someone's mind out of the park. Another thing again that I did was so in my boot camp, I was very open to like embracing collaborations. I think it's very important. Like you find an opportunity to collaborate with other people. It shows you could be a great team player, especially for people that have like no prior work experience. And so what I mean by that is, while at my boot camp, I participated in this hackathon. That seemed crazy at the beginning because I didn't think I could do much or I knew enough, but I was so glad that I jumped on it because we worked for days and thankfully we ended up winning this challenge. And it was great for me to like put on my resume and then just talk about what we did and then we won and then talk about like what I contributed. Exactly. So look for opportunities to collaborate with other people.
And I think,
yeah, and I think, sorry, just one last thing. I think one other important thing is, one other thing that you can do whenever I like get like once I like get the very first offer from a company saying that I have an interview coming up in a couple of weeks, I go very, very detailed into like researching on like just technical questions that they could ask you, system design questions that they could ask you, questions, videos that are people that put out there that the company could ask you, or just companies similar to that could ask you. And I don't think there's anything wrong in over preparing because I always want to be really confident before I go in. I don't want to like feel like I may not get it. I really just want to always feel so confident. So it's always important to like really, really, really prep. Like for my Microsoft interview, I started prepping like weeks before because I had a full-time job and I could only prep before and after work. And I just really went hard because I didn't want
and I think for me, one of the things was, as you graduate, as you get your first job, as you continue practicing your skills, you realize that, the code you wrote in your boot camp, was pretty much shit. And you could go back and refactor it. You could, do hackathons, you could prep for your interviews. Those little things, they add up and they also enhance your skills as a developer. And that's how you land your dream job, so.
Exactly. To that point, I actually like for all the algorithms we learned at bootcamp, I made sure that I noted down every single one of them. I didn't even understand or get them on the very first, most of them on the very first try. So what I did was that I noted them down. I made sure I practiced it the night or during the weekend, just so that, and I still go back to them whenever I have like another interview coming up, and it just really helps just to like.
Wura, I'm going to ask you one last question. Now that you're at Microsoft, you've had experience working with obviously smaller companies, right? What is it like to work with Microsoft, a bigger company? Are you receiving, the feedback or getting the feedback and the mentorship that, let's say, you would get from a smaller company? Like, what are the the differences working for a smaller company and now with a big tech company?
Okay, so I think for me, the first difference I would say is, I mean, with a bigger company, like there are like so many devs around you, like so many senior devs as well. So like there are like tons of support. So that's like a huge plus for bigger companies. Another thing again is like there are also like tons of managerial support. But then I think I'm grateful that I worked in a smaller company before going to a bigger company. To you really have to own your ground to like just what you would want to focus on. Like you wouldn't have someone actually like saying, oh, do this and do this and do this. Like you would have to be able to like say why you want to work on this and how that's going to impact the future. And I learned these things from the other companies that I was coming from. Another thing again that I think is different is that like with bigger companies like the one I work for right now, we spend a lot of time focusing on like code quality, heavily documenting our process. We have systems design review meetings, and something that as a software engineer, you're responsible for like this entire process. And my other jobs, at a job I worked at, like we didn't really care about testing our code, which made me so angry. But we didn't have time.
Mm-hmm.
So like, but then
That's powerful.
little things like this, like really like
Okay.
separates like the bigger company from like the smaller company.
Everyone. Okay. Well, I currently I'm with a smaller company. I've been with bigger corporations, but not in tech. So, we'll see where life takes me and everybody else. But yeah, thank you for that insight. I see we have a few questions. I received one question prior to the event, and the question was, as a person who has switched careers, what do you advise, like what are some of your advice for someone who has made that switch to tech in their late 20s, and what area is should that person focus on?
Okay, so I think just for me personally, like when I was starting out, weird thing is I was so crazy about mobile development. In fact, the very first thing I learned was Swift, which
Yeah.
it was a dumb reason why I picked Swift. I just loved Apple at that point in time. It wasn't anything technical. But first of all, the first thing that you should understand is I don't think like the language or the stack that you pick really truly matters. But for me personally, I would say the best place to start would always be to start with like the web fundamental basics, like HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. I think it's so fluid. It has a very large community. Every single problem you possibly can have on this planet has probably been answered by someone. There's so many libraries out there to help out. But don't try to start out with libraries and frameworks. Like if you are coming from a non-traditional background, you should actually try to master the fundamentals of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then really try to master like what it means to like deal with like object-oriented programming. And as I said, it's very helpful to practice algorithms alongside learning to code, because when you learn these fundamentals, it just makes you way more confident to like go ahead and like pick up libraries and frameworks. So I would personally recommend web development. Well, anyone could start with anything. I just think web development is just so fluid. You only need your laptop, like, and you need a browser, and you probably need maybe an editor. I think it's just way easier.
Yeah, and I also second that opinion. Just doing your research, I think HTML, CSS, JavaScript are good ways to sort of like get exposed to how the internet and the
And I
digital
think
side of things work.
one last thing, I think the most important thing is like there's so many free tutorials out there, but just as long as there's an end goal. So whatever tutorial you start with, there's an end goal for what you're going to be building is going to look like. So whatever you're doing, just ensure that you match that end goal. So you're not just reading anything, like reading about some topic, but then it's always good to like follow along and then do tutorials that would like make you like result into an end goal that you can go back and look at and then also improve upon if you love to.
Exactly. I do have two questions from the chat. One was, what would you say to some of us who don't have time to do a boot camp because of our job? How effective are platforms like Free Cool Camp or Code Academy and things like that?
So, like, I mean, I feel like different things would work for different people. I decided to go to a boot camp just because I just felt like if I give it my all in this period of time, it would take less as opposed to me juggling that with a job. So, but then if you are restricted to like having to juggle that with your job, that's also fine as well. I don't think it really matters what platform you use. Again, I think what is super important, as long as you are passionate about this thing, you just this is benchmark next for finished with. It doesn't matter what the platform is, or if you're in a boot camp, or if you're doing it after work. It doesn't matter how long it takes you as well. I don't think it's ever too late. I'm so grateful that I did it when I did it. If I had done it sooner when I was in uni, that would have also been good. If I had done it now, that would also be great. As long as you just focus on like the benchmarks and the goals and you keep progressing as you keep.
Exactly. Well, Wura, thank you so much. I know one person here asked us, what is a boot camp? It's pretty much just like an intensive, short-term program, usually 3 months or 6 months max, where like you learn all the skills you need, full stack, to become a developer. So
Yeah.
it's super intense. If you're up for the challenge, do your research. It's a program that is highly valuable, also expensive, because we know, at the end of the day, what you're getting in terms of value and
Yeah.
skill. So that's what a boot camp is. So yeah, Wura, thank you so much. I feel like the audience really enjoyed listening to you. Guys, follow Wura on Twitter. She's on Twitter. She's on LinkedIn. Reach out to her if you have any questions at all in terms of the journey, in terms of Microsoft, and anything in general.
Yeah.
Wura.
If anyone has any questions, my DMs are open. I really love to like help people as much as I can regarding like my journey. So it's my full name, Wura. You could always send me the questions, and I'll be more than happy to help out in any way I can.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Wura.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Bye.
Yes. Bye. The next section will begin very shortly. So please stay with us.